The gulf between paradise and hell, though quantifiable in mere kilometers, spans a chasm unbridgeable in a lifetime. On the hive world of Dastara, 17 billion souls drew breath beneath a perpetual canopy of industrial smog. Here, the morning light did not rise naturally, but arrived filtered through the colossal orbital mirrors. Their colossal surfaces polished to flawless perfection by servitor crews whose existence had known no other purpose for 3 long centuries. In the ethereal upper reaches of the noble spires, this artificial dawn descended, casting a golden, warm glow across marble floors that had never once felt the crude touch of a common boot. It was here, in chambers vaster than entire hab-blocks, that Lady Cassara Vera stirred, opening her eyes to another day of absolute comfort, a pristine tableau of perfect ignorance. The very air she inhaled had undergone purification 17 times before gracing her lungs. The water filling her opulent bath was sourced from glacial springs on a moon 2 systems distant, shipped at a staggering cost that could sustain 1,000 families for an entire year. The exquisite silk caressing her skin was the handiwork of artisans who had sacrificed their sight, crafting its delicate threads. Their dedication measured solely in thread count and texture, never in the harrowing human cost. Each morning, Cassara awakened to a meticulously constructed world, designed to cocoon her from the brutal truth of what her privileged existence truly demanded. At 23 years old, she was the sole heir to House Vera, one of the 7 venerable founding families that had presided over Dastara since the epic of the Great Crusade. Her ancient bloodline stretched back 12 millennia, each successive generation adding another layer of unimaginable wealth, another degree of sterile separation from the teeming masses far below. Within her sprawling suite of rooms, 40 floors above the choking smog line, she commanded more personal space than most citizens would ever glimpse in their entire lives. Her wardrobe housed garments whose worth eclipsed that of entire city districts. Her jewelry collection alone could procure a battleship. Yet, she had never once paused to inquire about the provenance of this immense wealth. What callous hands had mined the precious metals? What backs had bent under the crushing weight to harvest the raw materials that rendered her comfort possible? The morning ritual commenced, as it always had. Servitors, their faces rendered vacant by lobotomization, attended to her every need with chilling, mechanical precision. They robed her in garments that cost more than a worker's lifetime earnings. They meticulously arranged her hair with pins forged from rare metals, extracted from mines where men perish daily in catastrophic cave-ins and toxic exposures. They painted her face with cosmetics ground from minerals harvested by children, their fingers tragically small enough to reach the narrowest veins of precious ore. Every single touch of luxury she experienced carried the unseen, unacknowledged weight of suffering, a burden she had been rigorously trained never to contemplate. Breakfast arrived on gleaming silver platters, borne by human servants whose enforced silence was a testament to the price paid for their tongues. The food itself was exquisitely beyond imagination. Fruits, cultivated on distant agri-worlds, where the very soil was reportedly watered with the tears of indentured laborers. Meats, from creatures raised in conditions of perfect, pampered comfort, fed on grains that could sustain entire populations. Bread, baked from flour so impossibly refined that its production necessitated the toil of thousands, their lives reduced to mere efficiency ratings and production quotas. Lady Cassara ate without conscious thought, devoid of gratitude, completely oblivious to the fact that every single bite represented a deliberate choice made by others to feed her instead of themselves. The vista from her window was truly magnificent. Above, the pale golden sky stretched endlessly, pristine and unmarked by the toxic, swirling clouds that perpetually shrouded the lower levels. The orbital mirrors efficiently captured the fading light of Dastara's dying sun, reflecting it downwards in gentle, warming rays that deliberately never penetrated the deeper hives. From her elevated vantage point, she could discern the elegant curves of the planet's horizon, the distant shimmering gleam of other noble spires, the clean, austere architecture of the upper echelons, where her kind resided in isolated splendor. What she could not see, what the very ingenious design of her towering residence actively prevented her from seeing, was the brutal foundation upon which all of this opulent existence precariously rested. Far below, beyond the sight of even the most powerful magnifiers, 17 billion human beings commenced their own morning routines. They awakened in a darkness so absolute that many had never once witnessed natural light. They gasped for air thick with industrial particulate, scarring their lungs irrevocably before their 10th birthday. They consumed corpse starch, a macabre meal formed from the recycled protein of their deceased neighbors, seasoned with chemical additives that mercifully numbed the taste of decay. They toiled for 16-hour shifts in conditions that would instantly kill a noble in mere minutes. Their bodies were expendable resources, mere cogs in a colossal machine of production that existed solely to sustain the unspeakable luxury above. These were the calloused hands that mined the metals for Lady Kasara's intricate jewelry. These were the bowed backs that strained to harvest the materials for her silken clothing. These were the nimble fingers that crafted the exquisite goods she used without a second thought. Their collective skill and suffering were meticulously translated into a comfort she had never once questioned. The distance separating their world from hers was not merely physical. It was a profound chasm, meticulously carved by design, ruthlessly maintained by doctrine, and chillingly justified by a pervasive faith that transmuted brutal exploitation into divine righteousness. The Imperium taught that hierarchy was not just societal order, but divine will. The Emperor protected, but he protected through an unyielding structure. Through an absolute order, through the precise placement of each soul in its predetermined, designated role. The nobles ruled because the Emperor willed it. The masses toiled because the Emperor demanded it. This was not perceived as cruelty, but as cosmic justice. Not oppression, but as sacred duty. Every sermon relentlessly reinforced this truth. Every prayer fervently confirmed this stark reality. Every ritual joyously celebrated the wisdom of a system that effortlessly transformed human misery into divine order. Lady Kasara had absorbed these truths throughout her entire life. She believed them with the untested fervor of the sheltered, the unchallenged faith of the perfectly insulated. In her carefully curated world, doubt was not merely discouraged, it was rendered an impossibility. Her education conspicuously excluded any exposure to the stark reality below. Her tutors spoke only of duty, honor, and proper governance. Her companions shared her gilded isolation, her ingrained assumptions, her perfect ignorance of the horrific cost of their very existence. They moved through their days like actors in a grand, pre-scripted play, performing roles meticulously written by others, never once daring to question the script that decreed their comfort, necessitated the suffering of billions. The morning schedule encompassed the usual pursuits. A lesson in household management taught her to calculate the precise number of servants per room, yet conspicuously omitted any mention of their meager wages or arduous working conditions. A tutorial in artistic appreciation explored the sublime beauty of sculptures carved by artists who had tragically succumbed to lung disease from chronic stone dust exposure. A briefing on family investments discussed profit margins and production efficiency, but never once delved into the profound human cost of either. Each carefully designed activity reinforced her profound distance from reality. Each lesson added another insulating layer between her consciousness and the brutal truth of her situation. At noon, she joined her mother, Lady Celine Vera, for the daily ritual of correspondence. They sat in a chamber whose walls were lined with communications equipment, far exceeding the worth of most planetary governments' entire budgets, calmly reviewing messages from across the sector. Trade agreements that promised to swell their family's wealth by exploiting new, unsuspecting populations. Marriage proposals that would expand their influence by uniting their fortune with others built on similarly grim foundations. Investment opportunities that promised astronomical returns, measured in profit but paid for in countless lives. They discussed these grave matters with the casual, almost breezy detachment of people deliberating which fine wines to serve at dinner, their conversations flowing around human consequences as effortlessly as water around unyielding stone. The afternoon brought forth a series of social obligations. Tea with the wives and daughters of other noble houses, where conversations circled endlessly around matters of fashion, the latest gossip, and intricate social positioning. They meticulously discussed the newest trends in clothing, never once mentioning the squalid factories where children toiled for 18-hour shifts to produce the very fabrics. They gossiped about scandals and alliances, never acknowledging the rampant bribes and ruthless extortions that fundamentally funded their opulent lifestyles. They meticulously planned parties and lavish celebrations, never once considering the crushing tithes and taxes relentlessly extracted from starving populations to finance their entertainment. These women were not inherently evil. They were not consciously cruel. They were simply the tragic products of a system meticulously designed to shield them from the devastating consequences of their own existence. Their kindness, such as it was, extended only to their peers, their immediate families, their insulated circle of concern. They donated generously to charitable causes that benefited other nobles in distress. They prayed fervently for the emperor's divine protection. They genuinely considered themselves good people, faithful servants of humanity's sacred imperial order. The true tragedy lay not in their malice, but in their profound ignorance, not in their cruelty, but in their cultivated blindness, not in their hatred, but in their perfectly honed, chilling inability to truly see. As evening descended, it brought with it the promise of yet another lavish dinner. The vast kitchens commenced their preparations, a ballet of culinary artistry that transformed raw, often exotic materials into aesthetic perfection. Chefs, trained in ancient techniques passed down through countless generations, worked with ingredients gathered from across the vast galaxy. Each dish represented not merely sustenance, but a powerful statement. Each course was a bold declaration of wealth and refinement that unequivocally distinguished the noble houses from lesser mortals. The preparation alone demanded the labor of hundreds. Their collective skill and immense effort invested solely in crafting a single night's entertainment for people who would consume it without a second thought. Lady Cassara retired to her chambers to prepare for the impending feast. Her personal servants attended to her with practiced, efficient grace, their movements choreographed by years of dedicated service. Their silence was enforced by rigorous training that had tragically transformed human beings into living furniture. They dressed her in garments that shimmered with precious, interwoven metals, adorning her with jewelry that caught the artificial light, scattering it back in dazzling rainbow patterns. They meticulously arranged her appearance to project the quintessential image of nobility and effortless grace. She stood before mirrors that showed her only what she desired to see, a reflection of unparalleled beauty and immense privilege that revealed absolutely nothing of the crushing cost required to maintain either. As the sun finally set beyond the orbital mirrors, bathing the noble spires in a gentle, artificial twilight, the evening's entertainment began. The great halls filled with the soft hum of conversation, the delicate tinkle of crystal, the muted music emanating from trained performers whose talent had been explicitly purchased for the night. The air was redolent with the scent of exotic flowers, meticulously maintained in gardens where the water alone cost more than most citizens earned in a lifetime. Everything was perfect. Everything was beautiful. Everything was painstakingly designed to reinforce the seductive illusion that such perfection was natural, inherently deserved, and infinitely sustainable. But illusions, no matter how carefully maintained, could shatter with shocking suddenness. And on this particular evening, as Lady Cassara prepared to descend to dinner, the very first crack appeared in her perfectly constructed world. The house trembled, not violently, not dangerously, but with the subtle, deep vibration of some distant, profound disturbance. A sound like thunder, muffled yet persistent, rolled up from the crushing depths of the hive, carrying with it the ominous suggestion of things breaking, systems failing, order disrupting. The servitors paused momentarily in their duties, their augmented ears detecting frequencies well beyond human hearing. The house's sophisticated defensive systems briefly activated, scanning for phantom threats that did not materialize. Then, an unsettling silence returned, and the moment passed like a fleeting, unpleasant dream. Upon regaining her composure, Lady Cassara dismissed the disturbance with the ingrained ease of someone who had never once faced genuine danger. Perhaps maintenance issues, she mused, or construction accidents in the lower levels. Mere infrastructure problems that her family's highly capable engineers would resolve without her involvement or concern. She possessed no conceivable framework for understanding what that distant sound truly represented, no context for interpreting its dire significance, no reason whatsoever to connect it to her own privileged existence. The tremor might as well have originated on another planet, for all the impact it had on her meticulously planned evening. She descended to dinner, her mind already shifting to the intricate social dynamics that awaited her, which esteemed guests would attend, what conversations would unfold, which crucial alliances might be strengthened or tested over the course of the lavish meal. These were the intellectual challenges that occupied her sharp intelligence, the complex problems that demanded her immediate attention, the pressing concerns that singularly defined her reality. The suffering of billions remained as distant as the farthest stars, as abstract as complex mathematical theories, as utterly irrelevant as the weather on worlds she would never once visit. The vast dining hall gleamed with the effulgent light of 1,000 flickering candles, each flame meticulously reflected in surfaces polished to mirror-like brightness. The impossibly long table stretched beneath a vaulted ceiling, painted with grand, sweeping scenes of imperial triumph. Heroic, propagandistic images that transform brutal conquest into glorious victory, merciless oppression into righteous duty, cynical exploitation into divine will. The assembled guests represented the very finest of Dastara's noble society, men and women whose ancient bloodlines reached back through millennia, whose immense wealth shaped the destiny of billions, whose casual decisions only rippled through the galaxy like heavy stones thrown into still, undisturbed water. They conversed in voices rigorously trained to project absolute authority, their words carrying the undeniable weight of absolute certainty. They discussed matters of trade and governance with the casual, almost cavalier confidence of people who had never once faced the dire consequences of being wrong. Their conversations flowed around topics of galactic importance, decisions that would profoundly affect populations they would never meet, policies that would determine the fate of worlds they would never visit. Yet, for all their staggering power, for all their pervasive influence, they remained as profoundly ignorant of true reality as children, idly playing with complex toys they utterly failed to understand. The first course arrived with a ceremony befitting a sacred religious ritual. Servers moved with practiced, precise motions, their steps utterly silent on carpets woven from the finest, most exotic materials in the galaxy. Each plate represented countless hours of meticulous preparation, each artistic arrangement a work of art painstakingly created by masters of their craft. The food itself transcended mere sustenance, transformed instead into an aesthetic experience that engaged all the senses while simultaneously nourishing the body. The staggering cost of this single course alone could fund the entire food requirements of whole city districts. But such mundane considerations simply did not enter the consciousness of those who consumed it. Lady Cassara took her place at the high table with the automatic grace of someone born directly into privilege. Her position reflecting her family's immense status, her seat a symbolic throne that elevated her above even her noble peers. The conversation flowed around her like intricate music, familiar melodies of power and influence that she had heard all her life. She participated with the practiced ease of someone effortlessly playing a role they had rehearsed since childhood, her carefully chosen words contributing to discussions whose true consequences she could not possibly imagine, whose profound implications she had never been taught to consider. The topics ranged across the broad spectrum of noble concerns, trade agreements with off-world partners that promised to exponentially increase their profits while ruthlessly exploiting new populations, military contracts that would profit immensely from conflicts they themselves helped to ferment, investment opportunities in vast mining operations that consumed workers like mere fuel, their lives chillingly measured in production quotas rather than any semblance of human worth. Each subject was discussed with the detached, almost clinical, intellectualism of people analyzing purely abstract problems, their conversations utterly divorced from the harrowing human cost of every single decision they contemplated. A guest casually mentioned recent unrest in the lower hives, disturbances that had disrupted production schedules and threatened precious profit margins. The conversation swiftly turned to solutions, exploring various options for restoring order and maintaining relentless productivity. Increased surveillance, enhanced punishment, drastically reduced rations, until compliance was brutally restored. They spoke of human beings as mere components in a vast machine, as problems to be efficiently solved rather than as people to be humanely considered. Their proposed solutions chillingly revealed the casual cruelty of those who had never once faced the devastating consequences of their own choices, the abstract brutality of decision-makers who would never personally experience the results of their decisions. Lady Cassara listened with the mild interest of someone following a mildly engaging academic discussion. The lower hives existed in her consciousness solely as economic abstractions, as sources of revenue rather than as homes to living, breathing people. When she heard of unrest, she thought only of disrupted schedules rather than human desperation. When solutions were proposed, she evaluated their cold efficiency rather than their inherent morality. This was not inherent cruelty, but profound ignorance, not malice, but cultivated blindness, not hatred, but the perfect, impenetrable insulation that her privileged education and environment had so meticulously provided. The second course arrived as the first was meticulously cleared away. Another breathtaking masterpiece of culinary artistry that transformed raw ingredients into an elevated aesthetic experience. The presentation alone represented more labor than most citizens performed in an entire week, the preparation requiring skills developed over lifetimes of rigorous training. Each element had been painstakingly selected for its absolute perfection, its extreme rarity, its undeniable ability to demonstrate the boundless wealth and refined sophistication of those consuming it. The pleasure they derived from the meal was genuine, their appreciation real, their satisfaction honest. They were not pretending to enjoy themselves. They simply could not perceive the hidden, crushing cost of their enjoyment. The conversation gracefully shifted to matters of culture and refinement. Discussions of artistic patronage, support for musicians and poets, whose extraordinary talent served solely to glorify the nobility and justify their elevated position. They spoke of commissioning magnificent works that would forever celebrate their family histories, their grand achievements, their invaluable contributions to imperial glory. The artists they supported indeed created beauty, but a beauty purchased with the profound suffering of those who funded it through their ceaseless labor and crushing taxation. Each painting, each sculpture, each musical composition represented a conscious choice to lavish resources on aesthetic pleasure rather than human welfare, a decision made without a single conscious consideration of the alternatives. A young lord spoke passionately about his latest acquisition, a breathtaking sculpture carved from a rare, luminous stone by an artist whose talent was legendary. He described the piece in loving, intricate detail, its perfect proportions, its exquisite craftsmanship, its uncanny ability to capture the very essence of imperial nobility in frozen stone. He did not mention that the artist had tragically died of lung disease contracted from years of chronic exposure to stone dust, that the brutal quarry where the material was extracted had claimed hundreds of lives, that the transportation costs alone could have fed entire communities. These grim details existed entirely outside his framework of understanding, utterly irrelevant to his profound appreciation of beauty. Lady Cassara contributed her own insightful observations about aesthetic matters, her comments revealing an educated appreciation for art and culture. Her tutors had trained her exceptionally well in the recognition of beauty, the evaluation of artistic merit, the proper, cultivated response to creative expression. She spoke knowledgeably about technique and style, historical context, and cultural significance. Her intelligence was real, her education comprehensive, her aesthetic sense highly refined. Yet all of this extensive learning existed within carefully constructed boundaries. Impenetrable walls of ignorance that actively prevented her from connecting beauty to its true cost, art to its devastating consequences, culture to the pervasive suffering required to sustain it. The meal continued through multiple courses, each more elaborate and extravagant than the last. This progression represented a culinary journey through the finest, most exclusive products of the imperial economy. Ingredients gathered from across the vast galaxy at costs that would bankrupt entire worlds. Spices from distant agro-planets where the very soil was fertilized with the ground bones of previous generations of workers. Wines aged in subterranean vaults, carved by miners who never again saw the light of day. Delicacies meticulously prepared using techniques developed by master chefs who had tragically died perfecting their craft. Each bite represented the culmination of countless human efforts, the insidious transformation of suffering into pleasure that profoundly defined the noble experience. Between courses, exquisite entertainment was provided by performers whose exceptional talent had been explicitly purchased for the evening. Musicians played instruments crafted from materials worth more than entire city districts, their skill honed through rigorous training that consumed their entire lives. Dancers moved with a breathtaking grace that spoke of years of relentless discipline, their bodies shaped by practices that ultimately destroyed their health in service to their art. Poets recited verses that eloquently celebrated noble virtue and imperial glory, their carefully chosen words transforming brutal exploitation into divine righteousness, merciless oppression into sacred will. The entertainment was magnificent, the artistry genuine, the performance flawless. Only the staggering cost remained tragically invisible. Lady Cassara watched with the deep appreciation of someone raised to instinctively understand and value artistic excellence. Her response was not feigned. Her pleasure was genuine, her recognition of talent real. She had been educated to appreciate beauty in all its myriad forms, rigorously trained to recognize quality and refinement wherever they appeared. The performers before her represented the highest levels of human achievement, their unwavering dedication to their craft worthy of profound respect and admiration. She saw their artistry without once questioning the brutal system that produced it, enjoyed their performance without considering what their lives had truly cost them to achieve such unparalleled skill. The evening progressed with the stately, measured rhythm of ritual, each element meticulously following its designated place in the intricate sequence of noble entertainment. The conversation flowed through topics of interest unique to their social class, discussions that candidly revealed their concerns, their priorities, their profound understanding of the insulated world they inhabited. They spoke of matters that affected trillions of lives, with the casual, unquestioning confidence of people who had never once doubted their inherent right to make such momentous decisions, whose absolute authority had never been challenged, whose assumed wisdom had never been tested against the dire consequences of their choices. A senior lord discussed upcoming negotiations with off-world trading partners, complex deals that would expand their commercial empire while simultaneously exploiting new, vulnerable populations. His analysis was sophisticated, his understanding of intricate economic principles comprehensive, his strategic thinking impressively shrewd. He spoke of market forces and competitive advantages, profit margins and risk assessments, opportunity costs and strategic positioning. His expertise was genuine, his intelligence obvious, his competence unquestionable. Yet all of his vast knowledge existed entirely within a framework that treated human beings as mere resources, populations as markets, suffering as an acceptable, even necessary, cost of business. The discussion chillingly revealed the intricate machinery of exploitation that seamlessly sustained noble wealth, the complex, interconnected systems that transformed human misery into comfortable existence. Trade agreements that granted nobles exclusive access to products created by slave labor. Tax policies that relentlessly extracted wealth from the poorest while conspicuously exempting the richest. Labor practices that treated workers as utterly expendable components in vast production systems. Each element of the system had been refined over centuries, perfected through generations of callous experience, optimized to relentlessly maximize the flow of wealth upward, while simultaneously minimizing the ability of those below to resist or escape. Lady Kasara participated in these conversations with growing confidence as the evening progressed. Her rigorous education had meticulously prepared her for this very role. Her extensive training had provided her with the knowledge and skills necessary to seamlessly take her place among the ruling class. She offered insights that revealed her sharp intelligence, suggestions that demonstrated her nuanced understanding of complex issues, observations that showcased her growing grasp of the immense responsibilities that awaited her. Her contributions were welcomed, her opinions valued, her participation actively encouraged. She was fulfilling her destiny, gracefully growing into the role for which she was born, becoming the leader she was raised to be. Yet, even as she demonstrated her competence, even as she proved her worthiness to inherit her family's esteemed position, she remained completely isolated from the stark reality of what that position truly demanded. Her knowledge was comprehensive, but carefully bounded. Her intelligence was sharp, but focused solely on approved topics. Her skills were advanced, but applied only within acceptable, predefined parameters. She had been raised to be an effective ruler without ever being allowed to truly see what she would be ruling. Trained to make decisions without understanding their profound consequences. Educated to wield immense power without ever recognizing its true crushing costs. The final courses arrived as the evening reached its glittering climax. Delicacies so rare and prohibitively expensive that their very consumption represented a gesture of pure, unadulterated extravagance. These were foods that existed solely to demonstrate wealth. Ingredients that served no purpose beyond their ability to prove that those consuming them could afford the utterly impossible. The preparation alone required techniques so incredibly complex that mastering them consumed entire lifetimes. Humanity's lifetimes. Such specialized skills, while invaluable, often render their possessors prisoners of their own niche expertise. Every exquisite bite of their meal, therefore, became a testament to countless human struggles, transformed into fleeting moments of aristocratic pleasure. The starkest manifestation of a system that prized elite gratification over the sanctity of human life itself. The conversation, too, surged toward its own opulent crescendo. Emboldened by flowing wine and the undeniable taste of their collective successes, the participants shed their polite veneers, speaking more candidly about their grand designs and ambitions. They meticulously outlined strategies for multiplying their vast fortunes, debated techniques for tightening their grip on the subservient populations, and refined methods to ensure the current system remained immutably stable and obscenely profitable. Their planning was astonishingly precise, their comprehension of power dynamics deeply sophisticated, and their mastery of human psychology nothing short of formidable. They conversed not merely as nobles, but as conquerors charting new campaigns, as sagacious rulers meticulously designing intricate systems of control, or even as deities coolly orchestrating the destinies of mere mortals. Lady Cassara, initially a keen observer, soon found herself utterly engrossed in the electrifying momentum of these discussions, her own contributions growing progressively bolder and more assured as the evening wore on. With chilling ingenuity, she proposed refinements to existing taxation policies, meticulously designed to extract even greater wealth from the working populations while leaving them with precisely enough hope to prevent their mounting despair from escalating into open revolt. She further suggested subtle yet effective modifications to the educational system, aiming to cultivate an even more compliant workforce, simultaneously streamlining the identification and discreet removal of any potential dissenters. Her insights extended to the insidious psychological techniques that could subtly reframe overt exploitation as a coveted privilege and brutal oppression as essential protection. Her ideas, in their cold logic, were nothing short of brilliant. Her suggestions were sophisticated in their ruthlessness, and her profound understanding of human nature was truly impressive. Through these contributions, she unmistakably demonstrated the acute intelligence and strategic creativity that marked her as a genuine heir to her family's formidable legacy. Someone poised not merely to preserve their current dominance, but to dramatically expand it. The other assembled nobles responded with resounding approval and palpable admiration, unanimously recognizing in her the nascent qualities that would forge a formidable leader, a worthy and formidable successor to generations of supremely successful rulers. She had undeniably proven her mettle, earned her rightful place, and flawlessly demonstrated her fitness to inherit a dominion of power far beyond the wildest imaginings of common mortals. As the opulent evening drew gracefully to its conclusion, with the final triumphant toast raised and the last exquisite courses savored, Lady Cassara was enveloped by a profound sense of accomplishment and satisfaction, one that transcended mere social success. She felt she had truly participated in something monumental, something far grander than herself, contributing substantively to discussions that would irrevocably shape the future of entire worlds. She had proven, beyond any doubt, her innate worthiness to inherit a legacy stretching back through countless millennia. The evening, in her mind, had been utterly perfect. The company stimulating, the conversation profoundly enlightening. She retired to her private chambers, imbued with the serene contentment of one who had unequivocally found their destined place within the cosmic order, someone who had unearthed their ultimate purpose and wholeheartedly embraced their destiny. Yet, as she prepared for slumber within her lavish suite, with silent servants attending to her every need with robotic precision, and the lingering echoes of celebration fading into the plush silence of the upper spires, she remained utterly oblivious, unaware that her flawless evening had been financed by the unspeakable suffering of billions, that her deep satisfaction was purchased with the crushing despair of countless souls she would never glimpse, that her newfound contentment necessitated the relentless, ongoing exploitation of entire populations whose very existence she could not even begin to imagine. Tomorrow, she knew, would usher in yet another day defined by unparalleled comfort and unyielding privilege. Another cycle of intricate social obligations, another series of crucial political discussions, and another exquisite opportunity to reaffirm her fitness for the exalted role she was inherently born to fulfill. She would awaken, as always, within her meticulously curated, perfect world, a reality meticulously isolated by impenetrable barriers of inherited wealth and willful ignorance, shielded from inconvenient truths by intricate systems specifically designed to protect her from the dire consequences of her own existence. The immense, unbridgeable distance separating her gilded paradise from the brutal hell that ceaselessly sustained it would remain as it always had, utterly unmeasured and perpetually uncrossed. A vast, deliberate chasm maintained by conscious design, grim necessity, and the inherent human capacity to perceive only what one desperately wished to see. But tomorrow, for the very first time in her sheltered life, that meticulously maintained distance would irrevocably begin to collapse. The morning dawned precisely as every morning did in the upper spires, bathed in the same ethereal golden light, scented with the same meticulously purified air, and marked by the same carefully orchestrated routine of luxury and effortless comfort. Lady Cassara awoke feeling profoundly refreshed and utterly satisfied, her mind still vibrant with the lingering afterglow of the previous evening's triumphs, her confidence buoyed by the unreserved recognition she had garnered from her esteemed peers. The day stretching before her promised an uninterrupted continuation of similar pleasures and inherent privileges, offering yet another invaluable opportunity to deepen her understanding of the grand role she was born to embody, another deliberate step toward the immense inheritance that lay patiently awaiting her. Her personal retinue of servants attended to her intricate morning routine with their customary, almost surgical, efficiency, their movements so finely honed and practiced that they seemed mere extensions of her own subconscious will. They arrayed her in garments perfectly appropriate for the day's scheduled activities, meticulously arranging her appearance to project the quintessential image of noble grace, unquestionable authority, and innate superiority. The entire process felt as instinctual as breathing, as automatic as her own steady heartbeat, as utterly inevitable as the sunrise itself. She had in her entire existence never known any other way to begin a day, nor could she possibly conceive that billions of other souls awoke not to golden light, but to chilling darkness, gnawing cold, and the immediate crushing pressure of bare survival. Breakfast soon arrived, presented with its customary, breathtaking magnificence. Each individual dish was a veritable masterpiece of culinary art, meticulously designed not merely to tantalize the palate, but to awaken and delight all five senses simultaneously. Lady Cassara partook of the feast without haste, languidly savoring flavors that, to her, represented the pinnacle of human achievement, the ultimate transformation of raw, base materials into an exquisite aesthetic experience. This single meal, ironically, carried a price tag greater than what most families in the lower levels would ever glimpse in an entire lifetime. Yet such mundane calculations existed utterly beyond her insulated framework of understanding. She consumed this boundless luxury with the unconscious, effortless grace of someone who had never once known scarcity, never confronted want, and certainly never been forced to make the agonizing choice between competing fundamental needs. Today's meticulously arranged schedule included a significant journey to the family's expansive manufacturing interests situated deep within the mid-level districts. A carefully curated tour explicitly designed to furnish her with a foundational understanding of the colossal commercial enterprises that seamlessly funded her opulent lifestyle. This excursion was framed as an essential education in responsibility, a crucial preparation for the immense duties she was destined to inherit, and rigorous training in the proper oversight of complex business operations. The visit itself had been meticulously pre-planned, orchestrated to reveal only the impeccably clean, hyper-efficient, and supremely well-managed facets of their industrial empire, while simultaneously shielding her from anything that might remotely disturb her deeply ingrained perception of their enterprise as inherently benevolent and absolutely indispensable. Lady Cassara, for her part, approached the expedition with the mild academic interest of someone diligently fulfilling a weighty educational obligation. She intellectually grasped the paramount importance of comprehending the intricacies of the family business, recognized her pressing need to adequately prepare for future responsibilities, and readily accepted the necessity of acquiring practical experience in both management and oversight. Yet her comprehension of these critical necessities resided entirely within the comfortable, sanitizing abstractions of her elite education, a purely theoretical knowledge that had never once been rigorously tested against harsh practical reality, an academic preparation that had never truly confronted the profound human cost underpinning the very systems she was now learning to control. The air cab that gently ferried her toward the sprawling mid-levels was, in itself, a breathtaking masterpiece of advanced engineering and unadulterated luxury. Its gleaming hull was polished to an immaculate, mirror-like perfection, and its lavish interior was meticulously appointed with materials whose collective worth easily surpassed that of entire teeming city districts. She reclined, cocooned in a comfort so absolute that it shielded her from the outside world with the impregnable efficacy of a fortress. Her entire journey was flawlessly insulated from the gritty reality of the dense, bustling spaces she passed through. The vehicle's sophisticated environmental systems tirelessly filtered the very air, precisely regulated the temperature, subtly controlled the lighting, and meticulously modulated all ambient sound, ensuring utterly perfect conditions for her unwavering comfort. Even while in swift transit, Lady Cassara remained profoundly isolated from the vibrant, tumultuous world that surged and flowed around her. As the air cab commenced its slow, deliberate descent through the cavernous levels of the hive city, the panoramic view from her reinforced windows began to subtly yet inexorably transform. The pristine golden light characteristic of the upper reaches gradually yielded to the muted, filtered illumination of the mid-levels, where pervasive artificial lighting struggled to supplement the increasingly weak natural light. The architectural style visibly shifted, becoming decidedly more utilitarian, seemingly less concerned with aesthetic beauty than with stark, unyielding function. Simultaneously, the population density noticeably intensified, the once generous spacing between towering buildings dramatically decreased, and the overt signs of extravagant wealth and inherent privilege became far less ubiquitous, almost disappearing. Yet, even these palpable changes remained, for Lady Cassara, entirely abstract. Mere shifting scenery observed through the impenetrable barrier of armored, transparent steel that flawlessly maintained her profound separation from the gritty reality outside. The manufacturing district itself stood as a carefully engineered compromise between the relentless, unyielding necessity of industrial production and the delicate, easily offended demands of noble sensibility. Here, the family's vast industrial operations were meticulously housed within facilities deliberately designed to minimize any obvious visual ugliness, while simultaneously maximizing both efficiency and, crucially, profit. By Hive City standards, the imposing buildings were considered clean. The intricate network of walkways was maintained to what was deemed reasonable levels of safety, and the elaborate air filtration systems were deemed just adequate enough to prevent any immediate health hazards to visiting nobility. This was, in essence, industry meticulously rendered palatable for noble consumption, raw production meticulously sanitized and made acceptable for aristocratic oversight. Lady Kasara disembarked from her opulent air cab with the easy, innate confidence of someone stepping onto familiar, welcoming territory. The uniformed facility managers immediately greeted her with a display of deep deference, perfectly appropriate to her exalted station, their exhaustive preparations evident in every meticulously arranged detail of the reception. Indeed, they had dedicated weeks to the precise orchestration of her visit, cleaning colossal machinery that was typically left to accumulate layers of industrial grime, rigorously briefing workers on the exact, proper behavior to exhibit in the sacred presence of nobility, and meticulously arranging tours that would reveal only precisely what they wished her to perceive, while skillfully concealing anything that might possibly disturb her carefully cultivated understanding of their operations. The meticulously guided tour commenced in the pristine administrative sections, expansive, comfortable spaces where the complex business of management unfolded within environments not overtly dissimilar to her own luxurious home. Here, she was introduced to an array of supervisors and chief accountants, lead engineers, and strategic planners, the educated professionals, the indispensable intermediaries who skillfully translated abstract, noble directives into concrete operational reality. They spoke her refined language, effortlessly shared her cultural references, and intrinsically understood her sophisticated concerns and priorities. Their meticulously prepared reports were undeniably comprehensive, yet equally carefully edited. Their detailed explanations were precise, but always diplomatically phrased. Their polished presentations were masterfully designed to inform without ever remotely alarming her. The impressive production figures they meticulously displayed showcased staggering revenues that unequivocally demonstrated the triumphant success of family policies and the undeniable competence of their management oversight. The robust profit margins lucidly revealed the breathtaking efficiency of their operations, generating an unparalleled return on investment that overwhelmingly justified continued confidence in their methods. Furthermore, the ambitious growth projections vividly suggested expanding opportunities, vast new markets ripe for exploitation, and additional subjugated populations to seamlessly incorporate into their burgeoning commercial empire. Absolutely everything they presented to her served to reinforce the unwavering conviction in the inherent righteousness of their grand enterprise, the absolute necessity of their methods, and the glorious inevitability of their continued success. Lady Kasara perused these carefully curated materials with a palpable, steadily growing satisfaction, her innate confidence in the family business profoundly reinforced by the irrefutable evidence of its overwhelming prosperity and surgical efficiency. She posed incisive intelligent questions that clearly revealed her sophisticated understanding of fundamental business principles, offered astute observations that powerfully demonstrated her firm grasp of strategic thinking, and provided insightful suggestions that showcased her undeniable readiness to assume even greater responsibility. The managers, in turn, responded with effusive approval and genuine respect, recognizing in her the precise qualities that would undoubtedly forge an exceptionally effective leader, someone not merely capable of maintaining the vast empire she would inherit, but destined to dramatically expand it. The next phase of the meticulously planned tour led her deeper into the sprawling production areas themselves, specifically carefully selected sections of the colossal manufacturing complex where the raw, physical work of wealth creation actually took place. These chosen spaces had undergone extensive, almost surgical preparation for her visit, cleaned far beyond their normal grimy standards, and meticulously organized to present the most unequivocally favorable impression of both working conditions and operational efficiency imaginable. Moreover, the very workers she encountered had been specially chosen, handpicked for their agreeable appearance and compliant demeanor, for their innate ability to project the convincing image of satisfied, productive employees, rather than the stark, harrowing reality of desperate, thoroughly exploited human resources. She observed the intricate production processes unfolding before her with the keen, analytical interest of someone diligently endeavoring to comprehend the technical intricacies of colossal wealth creation. The sheer scale of the machinery was undeniably impressive. The synchronous coordination of various operations bewilderingly complex, and the overall efficiency blindingly obvious. Workers moved with practiced, almost robotic skill, their every motion precisely coordinated by years of grueling experience, their measured output directly translating into formidable family profit. She witnessed the seamless, almost magical transformation of raw, unrefined materials into gleaming finished goods, the relentless application of human labor yielding the very products that would generate the immense wealth sustaining her privileged lifestyle. To her sheltered perception, it all appeared impeccably clean, flawlessly efficient, and utterly, comfortably, morally neutral. The workers she briefly encountered had, of course, been meticulously coached in the precise, appropriate responses to any noble inquiry. With practiced earnestness, they expressed profound gratitude for their employment, conveyed their genuine satisfaction with their working conditions, and declared unwavering loyalty to the benevolent family that so generously provided them with both purpose and sustenance. Their every word had been rigorously rehearsed, their deferential demeanor painstakingly practiced, their entire performance masterfully designed to reinforce her deeply ingrained understanding of the relationship between nobility and workers as inherently mutually beneficial, naturally ordered, and unequivocally morally justified. She saw precisely what she had been prepared to see, heard exactly what she had been trained to expect, and understood only what she had been painstakingly educated to comprehend. Lady Cassara engaged with these compliant workers, assuming the air of benevolent interest, merely fulfilling her perceived noble obligation to display a superficial concern for those under her absolute authority. She inquired about their general welfare, their professed satisfaction, and their boundless appreciation for the invaluable opportunities graciously provided by the family enterprise. Their rehearsed responses, predictably, served only to affirm her deeply held understanding of herself as a truly benevolent ruler, someone whose immense wealth in her mind selflessly served the greater good by offering essential employment and much-needed structure to those who would otherwise flounder, utterly devoid of purpose and direction. This carefully managed interaction left her feeling profoundly satisfied with her elevated role, utterly confident in her unwavering righteousness, and supremely secure in her perception of the immutable natural order of their society. As the tour gracefully progressed through additional, equally sanitized sections of the colossal facility, her exposure to the stark reality of production remained rigorously controlled and heavily edited. She was permitted to witness only those aspects of manufacturing that could be flawlessly presented as noble and absolutely necessary. Precisely the elements of the industrial process that seamlessly supported her ingrained understanding of the family enterprise as inherently beneficial and unimpeachably righteous. The deferential managers explained each complex process in meticulously chosen terms that tirelessly emphasized efficiency and dire necessity, staggering productivity and immense profit, relentless success, and continuous growth. Their masterfully crafted language effortlessly transformed brutal exploitation into a coveted opportunity, pervasive suffering into dutiful service, and crushing desperation into unwavering dedication. The sheer technical aspects of production genuinely fascinated her, particularly the bewildering complexity and precise coordination required to transform raw, base materials into gleaming finished products. She began for the first time to truly grasp the sheer monumental scale of the operations that unfailingly funded her luxurious lifestyle, the intricate, interconnected systems that tirelessly generated the immense wealth she had always, without question, taken for granted. Her questions, reflecting this burgeoning intellectual engagement, grew increasingly sophisticated as her understanding deepened and her interest became more genuinely engaged as she recognized the impressive, almost superhuman achievement that these vast facilities collectively represented. She even began to feel a burgeoning sense of pride in the family enterprise, a profound satisfaction in the surgical efficiency and undeniable success of the operations she would one day inherit. Yet, even as her technical knowledge expanded, even as her superficial understanding deepened, she remained utterly and completely insulated from the crushing human cost of the very efficiency she so admired, the pervasive suffering that relentlessly underlay the success she so blithely celebrated, and the desperate, primal desperation that drove the relentless productivity she so readily praised. This entire elaborate tour had been meticulously designed to educate her about the intricate mechanics of business operations while simultaneously protecting her from any inconvenient moral complications, to ostensibly increase her competence while artfully preserving her innocence, to ostensibly prepare her for future leadership while diligently maintaining her profound ignorance of the true, brutal demands of that power. The final segment of the extensive tour guided her through the meticulously organized quality control and vast shipping operations, where the finished, high-value products of the family enterprise were systematically prepared for distribution to sprawling markets across the entire sector. Here, she witnessed the tangible culmination of the entire production process. Countless goods, now ready to be transformed into the liquid wealth that flawlessly sustained her extravagant existence. The operational efficiency was undeniably impressive. The intricate organization was profoundly sophisticated, and the sheer scale was utterly massive. Products flowed seamlessly through complex systems meticulously designed to maximize speed while rigorously ensuring impeccable quality. Their precise movements, coordinated by a level of logistical planning that literally spanned multiple star systems. The managers, with evident pride, elucidated the bewildering complexity of the distribution networks that ceaselessly carried family products to markets across the entire galaxy, detailing trading relationships that had endured for centuries, and commercial agreements so powerful they actively shaped the destinies of entire worlds. She began, intellectually, to truly grasp the immense scope of her family's formidable influence, the staggering extent to which their every decision silently affected countless populations she would never, ever see, and the profound degree to which their accumulated wealth depended entirely on systems that, in their vastness, touched billions of individual lives. Yet, even this nascent understanding remains stubbornly abstract, purely theoretical, and entirely divorced from the very real, often brutal, human consequences of the immense power she was now learning to wield. As the comprehensive tour finally concluded, and she prepared to gracefully return to the enveloping comfort and serene familiarity of the upper spires, Lady Cassara was suffused with a deep sense of accomplishment and profound satisfaction. She had, in her estimation, impeccably fulfilled her educational obligation, significantly expanded her understanding of the complex family business, and unequivocally demonstrated her burgeoning readiness to assume even greater responsibility. The visit, she concluded, had been an unqualified success, thoroughly informative, profoundly insightful, and entirely appropriate to her elevated station. She re-entered her luxurious air cab imbued with unwavering confidence in the inherent righteousness of the family enterprise, immense pride in the surgical efficiency of their vast operations, and a quiet satisfaction in her own rapidly growing competence as a formidable future leader. The air cab gracefully ascended through the myriad levels of the Hive City, meticulously carrying her back toward the pristine golden light and immaculately purified air of the noble districts. The return journey navigated the very same transitional zones she had casually observed during her descent earlier that day. But now she viewed them with the newfound confidence of someone who believed she truly understood their intrinsic place within the grander, overarching system. Someone who recognized their grim necessity and consequently accepted their immutable inevitability. The subtle yet stark changes in architecture, the undeniable shifts in population density, and the overall degradation of general conditions no longer appeared as mere fleeting scenery, but rather as irrefutable evidence of the natural order, the proper and divinely ordained arrangement of society according to both sacred will and undeniable practical necessity. But even as the air cab tirelessly climbed toward the pristine safety of the uppermost reaches, even as Lady Cassara settled deeply back into her luxuriously cushioned seat, suffused with the profound satisfaction of educational duty impeccably fulfilled, the flawless, intricate machinery of her meticulously maintained insulation unexpectedly encountered an imperfection so minute, so seemingly insignificant, that it passed almost entirely unnoticed. A fleeting, minor system failure within the air cab's advanced navigation array. A microscopic glitch so incredibly brief that it barely registered on the redundant monitoring systems. It was a momentary, almost imperceptible disruption in the otherwise perfect coordination of the technology that ceaselessly maintained her profound separation from stark reality. This critical failure endured for less than 30 fleeting seconds. The air cab's sophisticated backup systems engaged instantaneously. The necessary course correction was utterly minimal, and the resulting delay barely noticeable. Under any normal circumstances, such a minor malfunction would simply be automatically logged for routine maintenance during the next service cycle and promptly forgotten. Merely another tiny, inconsequential imperfection within the colossal, intricate machinery that perpetually sustained noble existence. The air cab continued its smooth, uninterrupted ascent, its privileged passenger completely unaware that anything had even momentarily gone awry. Its complex systems now functioning well within acceptable parameters despite the brief, pivotal disruption. Yet, within those brief 30 seconds, that fleeting moment of technological imperfection, the meticulously maintained boundaries of Lady Kasara's pristine world irrevocably shifted by the smallest possible margin. The unexpected navigation failure caused the air cab to deviate from its precisely planned route by a mere few kilometers, a distance so utterly insignificant it barely even qualified as an error. The vigilant backup systems corrected the deviation almost immediately, returning the sleek vehicle to its proper trajectory with seamless mechanical precision. Her arrival delay would be measured only in minutes, the inconvenience minimal, and the impact on her tightly structured schedule utterly negligible. But those few stray kilometers of deviation were enough to carry the air cab directly over a section of the Hive City that was never, under any circumstances, meant to be glimpsed by noble eyes. Vast, forgotten areas that existed entirely outside the carefully choreographed routes designed to shield the aristocracy from uncomfortable, inconvenient realities. Through the filtered transparal of her reinforced window, Lady Kasara suddenly glimpsed spaces that featured on no approved tour, witnessed teeming populations that were never meant to encounter her detached gaze, and perceived horrifying conditions that existed far beyond the meticulously constructed boundaries of acceptable, noble knowledge. This horrifying, visceral view lasted only a few agonizing moments before the navigation systems successfully restored the air cab's proper course. But in those brutal, fleeting moments, she witnessed sights her meticulously controlled education had never, ever prepared her to confront. Raw realities that her comfortable inherited assumptions simply could not easily absorb. She saw teeming hab blocks so impossibly crowded that human beings seemed to live stacked like mere cargo, their grimy windows perpetually dark with centuries of accumulated filth, their dilapidated structures visibly sagging under the crushing weight of desperate overpopulation. She glimpsed vast manufacturing facilities where the very air appeared to writhe with swirling, toxic particulate matter, where colossal machinery operated without the most basic safety measures she had observed during her carefully orchestrated tour. She saw emaciated workers moving with a horrifying, weary familiarity through conditions that would undoubtedly kill her, a noble, in mere minutes. Their bodies horrifyingly adapted by generations of ceaseless exposure to environments that systematically destroyed human health as surely and lethally as any weapon destroyed human life. Children, who by any standard deserved to be receiving an education, were instead tending to monstrous machines that towered over them like predatory beasts, their small, nimble fingers deemed invaluable for reaching into dangerous spaces where adult hands could not venture. Women, bent double under impossible loads that far exceeded their physical capacity, their backs permanently curved into unnatural arcs, by labors that had utterly transformed their bodies into mere tools for the creation of a staggering wealth they would, themselves, never once touch. Suddenly, the air cab passed directly over a section where a colossal mag rail tunnel had catastrophically collapsed, the vast, jagged debris creating an apocalyptic canyon of twisted metal and shattered stone. Emergency crews swarmed within the ruins, toiling with the desperate, almost frenzied efficiency of those who understood that their own precarious lives hinged entirely upon their speed and unwavering skill. From the wreckage, bodies, both living and lifeless, emerged at grim, irregular intervals. Some moved with the agonizing slowness of the grievously injured, while others were carried with the chilling stillness that spoke unequivocally of damage beyond any hope of repair. The true, terrifying scale of the disaster became horrifyingly apparent to her as she grasped the sheer extent of the collapse, a catastrophic failure of critical infrastructure that had undoubtedly claimed hundreds of lives and utterly crippled the vital transportation network connecting the hive's various sprawling levels. Lady Cassara stared down at the unfolding scene with the morbid fascination of someone witnessing an event utterly, completely outside their known experience, something that existed far, far beyond the narrow boundaries of their comprehension. The disaster raging below represented a devastating failure of systems she had never once considered, a calamitous breakdown of infrastructure she had never even remotely noticed, the grim, direct consequences of decisions she had never been asked to contemplate, let alone suffer. The struggling workers, sifting through the wreckage, were living, breathing people whose existence she had never genuinely acknowledged, whose suffering she had never been required to even fleetingly consider, whose tragic deaths she had certainly never been taught to count as significant. The navigation systems completed their precise correction, seamlessly restoring the air cab to its intended trajectory and swiftly carrying her away from the horrific scene of destruction. The view from her reinforced window promptly reverted to the familiar, comforting sights of the planned, sanctioned route, the meticulously maintained spaces that reliably presented only acceptable, sanitized images of hive life for noble observation. The brutal, unscheduled glimpse of raw reality faded behind her like a particularly vivid, unsettling nightmare, quickly replaced by the reassuring normalcy of perfectly controlled environments and skillfully managed perceptions. Yet, the stark, brutal images she had witnessed refused to vanish as readily as she wished, remaining imprinted upon her mind with an unexpected, almost defiant persistence, lingering with an uncomfortable, unsettling clarity. The air cab continued its smooth, inexorable ascent toward the pristine safety and accustomed comfort of the upper reaches. But Lady Cassara found herself uncharacteristically unable to dismiss what she had just witnessed with the effortless ease she would have preferred. That brief, searing glimpse of unvarnished reality had, like a subtle chisel, inadvertently created a minuscule, almost imperceptible crack in the once perfect shell of her carefully constructed ignorance, a tiny yet critically significant flaw in the otherwise seamless barrier that had always flawlessly separated her from the stark, brutal truth of her very existence. The crack was undeniably small, almost insignificant in its physical manifestation, but it was enough to allow unsettling questions to begin seeping through. Questions her elite education had never taught her to formulate, insidious doubts her privileged upbringing had never prepared her to even remotely manage. Against her will, she found her mind relentlessly circling back to the desperate people she had seen struggling amidst the wreckage. She wondered, with a nascent, unfamiliar pang, whether they had survived their horrific injuries, whether their families would mourn their inevitable deaths, and whether their immense sacrifice truly served any purpose beyond the callous maintenance of the very systems that so lavishly benefited those who dwelled far, far above their suffering. These were not the kind of questions she had been meticulously trained to ask. These were unsettling concerns she had been assiduously educated to avoid. Insidious thoughts that profoundly threatened the comfortable, bedrock certainties that had always defined her privileged worldview. Yet they persisted now with an uncomfortable, relentless intensity, stubbornly refusing to be dismissed or simply forgotten. The air cab finally reached the grand transport nexus that exclusively served the noble districts, a colossal facility impeccably designed to facilitate seamless transitions between various modes of transportation while meticulously maintaining appropriate levels of security and unparalleled comfort. Here, Lady Cassara was expected to effortlessly transfer to ground vehicles for the final short journey to her family's towering spire, a routine transition that, under normal circumstances, demanded absolutely no thought or conscious attention from her. This opulent facility represented the absolute pinnacle of efficient design, its myriad complex systems flawlessly coordinated to minimize any conceivable inconvenience, while simultaneously maximizing both safety and comfort for its privileged noble users. But even as the air cab gracefully approached the nexus, even as the routine transfer prepared to unfold with its customary mechanical precision, the far-reaching aftermath of the catastrophic tunnel collapse began to ripple and affect intricate systems far, far beyond the immediate disaster site. The vast mag-rail network, which interconnected the hive's numerous levels, operated as a single, integrated whole, each critical component inherently dependent on the proper, flawless functioning of every other element. Thus, the collapse had not merely destroyed a single, isolated tunnel, but had critically disrupted the delicate, systemic balance that kept the entire, sprawling transportation system operational. Secondary failures swiftly began to ripple through the network, falling in rapid succession like a line of toppling dominoes. Each new breakdown imposed further strain on the remaining components. Every malfunction intensifying the pressure on systems already pushed well past their intended operational limits. Power fluctuations started to destabilize the electrical grid, the very lifeblood energizing the rail lines. Concurrently, computer malfunctions crippled the sophisticated scheduling algorithms designed to coordinate traffic flow. Mechanical systems, desperate to compensate for the lost capacity of the destroyed tunnel, were forced beyond safe operating thresholds, leading to inevitable breakdowns. The once efficient transport nexus, built to manage typical traffic volumes with comfortable ease, now found itself utterly overwhelmed by the chaotic redirection of vehicles and passengers displaced by the catastrophic rail network failure. Emergency protocols automatically activated, yet these carefully constructed systems were never engineered to contend with disruptions of such staggering magnitude or prolonged duration. The meticulous ballet of noble transportation began to unravel as the harsh reality of infrastructure collapse encroached upon spaces meticulously designed to be impervious to such worries. Lady Cassara's aircab idled in a holding pattern above the nexus as traffic control frantically attempted to manage the escalating chaos unfurling below. Through her viewport, she could discern the intensifying disorder as systems engineered for seamless operation struggled, visibly straining to meet unforeseen demands. Ground vehicles queued in lines that snaked far beyond the facility's capacity, their drivers palpably frustrated by delays that were, by all accounts, never meant to occur. Emergency services streaked through the confusion, lights flashing and sirens wailing, their stark urgency a jarring contrast to the typically leisurely pace of noble travel. The delay stretched from mere minutes into grueling hours as the cascade of failures spread relentlessly through increasingly vital systems. What had begun as a minor navigation error had now escalated into a profound disruption, fracturing the carefully maintained boundaries that separated noble existence from the harsh, unpredictable realities surrounding it. Lady Cassara found herself suspended, trapped within her air cab, above a scene of accelerating pandemonium. Her cherished isolation was no longer complete, her separation from reality no longer absolute. As the agonizing delay persisted, and as all attempts to restore normal operations proved woefully inadequate to the scale of the disruption, Lady Cassara confronted a choice that should never have been hers to make. She could remain within the secure confines of her air cab, patiently waiting for systems to be repaired and normal service to resume, accepting whatever protracted delays this might entail. Or she could descend directly into the Nexus itself, navigating the burgeoning chaos to seek alternative transportation, thereby accepting a level of exposure to uncontrolled reality that violated every cherished principle of noble security and comfort. Logically, the choice should have been self-evident. Safety protocols unequivocally demanded that she remain in the secure environment of her air cab until proper arrangements could be meticulously organized for her transportation. Her extensive training had always underscored the paramount importance of maintaining appropriate separation from uncontrolled populations and unpredictable situations. Her entire education had meticulously prepared her to precisely avoid this kind of direct exposure to the messy, complicated, and dangerous realities that existed beyond the carefully guarded boundaries of noble privilege. Yet, as she watched the maelstrom below, as she witnessed the desperate, tireless efforts of workers struggling to reimpose order upon systems never designed to withstand such profound disruptions, she found herself confronted by unsettling questions that her comfortably sheltered existence had never once required her to ponder. The individuals toiling within the Nexus were not mere abstract resources. They were living, breathing people whose competence and unwavering dedication determined the very functionality of the systems that served her. Their relentless efforts, their silent sacrifices, their willingness to push beyond safe limits in their pursuit of solutions, these were the raw human realities underpinning the smooth, almost invisible operation of her privileged existence. The decision, when it finally arrived, caught her off guard with its startling suddenness and undeniable clarity. Rather than passively waiting for systems to be magically restored, rather than remaining safely isolated from the spiraling complications below, Lady Cassara chose to descend into the Nexus herself, to brave the chaos and seek out whatever alternative transportation might be available. It was a decision that flagrantly violated every principle of her noble upbringing, directly contradicted every lesson instilled by her education, and threatened to dismantle every fundamental assumption that defined her understanding of proper, noble behavior. The air cab gently touched down in a section of the Nexus ordinarily reserved for maintenance vehicles, a utilitarian space utterly devoid of the luxurious amenities and stringent security measures characteristic of noble passenger areas. As Lady Kassara emerged from the familiar comfort of her transportation, she stepped, for the very first time, into an environment where her privilege offered no automatic protection, where her status provided no guarantee of special treatment, and where she would have to navigate reality without the accustomed buffering presence of servants and intricate systems designed to shield her from unpleasant complexities. The nexus surrounding her pulsed with an intensity and urgency she had never before experienced. Workers moved with a desperate, almost frantic efficiency, struggling to manage crises that multiplied faster than solutions could possibly be implemented. The very air carried an unfamiliar symphony of sounds, the sharp, dangerous crackling of overloaded electrical systems, the grinding of machinery pushed far beyond safe operating limits, the strained voices of people communicating essential information under extreme duress. Everything moved at a dizzying pace that contrasted sharply with the unhurried rhythms of noble existence. She attempted to make her way through the sprawling facility toward the areas where alternative transportation might potentially be arranged, but quickly realized that her ingrained understanding of the Nexus layout, derived from carefully curated tours and sterile educational briefings, offered woefully little guidance for navigating the raw chaos of actual emergency operations. The spaces she had known from previous visits had been radically transformed by the crisis. Familiar landmarks were now obscured by hastily deployed emergency equipment, and normal pathways were blocked by diverted traffic flows. Workers rushed past her with hardly a glance, their laser-like attention focused on immediate, critical problems rather than the leisurely consideration of noble concerns. For the first time in her life, Lady Kassara found herself in an environment where her presence commanded no special attention, where her needs were not automatically prioritized, and where she was forced to compete with other pressing demands for the limited resources of human attention and assistance. The experience was both terrifying and strangely liberating, frightening in its profound unfamiliarity, yet oddly honest in its complete lack of pretense. As she grappled to navigate the unfamiliar environment, Lady Kassara encountered a maintenance supervisor, a man whose responsibilities included managing transportation alternatives for displaced passengers. He was in his 50s, his face deeply etched by years of exposure to unforgiving industrial environments, his hands bearing the permanent stains of someone who directly worked with machinery rather than merely delegating tasks to others. His demeanor blended professional competence with the barely suppressed frustration of someone contending with problems that had no easy answers. When she identified herself and politely requested assistance with transportation arrangements, his response starkly revealed the chasm between noble expectations and operational reality. The intricate systems meticulously designed to provide seamless service to aristocratic passengers had been utterly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the current crisis, their capacity necessarily redirected to far more urgent priorities. The only alternative transportation available consisted of utilitarian maintenance vehicles and emergency transports, conveyances that entirely lacked the comfort, security, and refined amenities that noble travel typically demanded. The supervisor explained the dire situation with the weary patience of someone long accustomed to dealing with difficult circumstances and demanding personalities. The mag-rail collapse had not merely disrupted local transportation, it had crippled the entire network, connecting the various levels of the immense hive city. Repair efforts were underway, he assured her, but the sheer scope of the damage required resources that had simply never been stockpiled for emergencies of this unprecedented magnitude. Restoration of normal service, he warned, would require days, perhaps weeks, rather than hours, and possibly even months before full capacity could be restored. Lady Cassara listened to this sobering explanation, her understanding of the true scale of the disaster, which she had only glimpsed from her air cab, growing with each word. She began to grasp the profound extent to which systems she had never truly considered could fail so utterly and completely. The comfortable assumptions underpinning her existence had included the unshakable belief that the infrastructure serving noble needs was essentially indestructible, flawlessly maintained by competent professionals whose expertise guaranteed unfailing, reliable operation. The brutal reality of cascading failures, overwhelming demands, and woefully inadequate resources challenged these deeply ingrained assumptions in ways that her sheltered education had never, ever prepared her to handle. The alternative transportation offered was a maintenance pod, explicitly designed for technical personnel traveling between facilities, a purely utilitarian vehicle that prioritized function over comfort and reliability over luxury. The journey to the noble districts, he explained, would necessitate traveling through sections of the hive normally meticulously avoided by aristocratic passengers, areas where the careful maintenance of noble zones gave way to the stark, functional minimalism of working spaces. The supervisor explicitly warned her that the journey would expose her to conditions that flagrantly violated every established standard of noble transportation. The route would traverse industrial districts where the air quality fell far below aristocratic health requirements. The vehicle itself lacked the sophisticated filtration systems that normally protected noble passengers from exposure to unacceptable environmental conditions. The entire journey would carry her through populations and spaces that were never, ever intended for aristocratic observation. Lady Cassara accepted these harsh conditions with a perplexing mixture of resignation and an unexpected surge of curiosity. The practical necessity of reaching her destination undeniably overrode the comfortable protocols of noble travel. But beyond mere practicality, she found herself genuinely intrigued by the prospect of seeing the very spaces that her normal life had so carefully circumvented. The brief, unsettling glimpse of reality from her air cab had awakened within her a nascent hunger for understanding, a desire her privileged existence had never allowed her to recognize, a deep-seated yearning to see beyond the meticulously maintained boundaries of noble perception. The maintenance pod was cramped, unequivocally uncomfortable, and entirely devoid of the amenities that rendered noble travel so pleasant. The seats were designed for pure function rather than any semblance of comfort. The controls were oriented toward ruthless efficiency rather than elegant aesthetics. The entire vehicle had been constructed to standards that prioritized reliability and cost-effectiveness far above mere passenger satisfaction. For Lady Cassara, accustomed to transportation that not only insulated her from the outside world, but also enveloped her in lavish luxury, the pod represented a truly shocking reduction in both comfort and status. Yet, as the pod commenced its journey through the sprawling depths of the hive, carrying her along routes that deliberately bypassed the carefully maintained, sanitized corridors of noble travel, she discovered that this drastic reduction in comfort brought with it an unexpected, profound increase in contact with unvarnished reality. The pod's viewports, designed for technical observation rather than leisurely tourist appreciation, offered unfiltered views of spaces that her normal transportation had never allowed her to witness. The industrial districts through which they now traveled operated at levels of intensity and sheer desperation that dwarfed even the managed chaos of the transport nexus. Here, the vast production facilities that generated the immense wealth sustaining noble existence revealed their true, raw character, stripped bare of any pretense when not meticulously prepared for aristocratic observation. The air shimmered with toxic particulates that would instantly kill unprotected nobles in mere minutes, yet which workers breathed daily as an unavoidable condition of their employment. Machinery operated far beyond safe parameters, driven relentlessly by quotas that prioritized production above human safety and cold efficiency above worker welfare. Lady Cassara observed these harrowing conditions through the pod's viewports with a growing mix of horror and morbid fascination. The workers she saw moved with the exhausted, grim determination of people pushed far beyond their physical limits, their bodies bearing the permanent, undeniable marks of industrial labor performed under conditions that destroyed human health as surely as warfare annihilated human life. Children toiled alongside adults, a stark violation of every safety protocol she had learned during her educational tours, their small size making them tragically valuable for tasks requiring access to spaces where adult bodies simply could not fit. The supervisor operating the pod provided a steady commentary that further illuminated the vast, hypocritical gap between official policies and the brutal operational reality. The safety regulations that existed so elegantly on paper were, he explained, routinely ignored when they conflicted with unrelenting production requirements. The working conditions that might appear marginally acceptable during a noble inspection deteriorated rapidly and completely once aristocratic attention was focused elsewhere. The inherent humanity of the workers, he stated plainly, simply vanished beneath the crushing pressure of quotas that treated human beings as utterly expendable resources within systems meticulously designed to maximize profit, regardless of the immeasurable human cost. As the pod continued its descent through increasingly desperate districts, Lady Cassara slowly began to grasp the true, horrifying foundation upon which her comfortable existence explicitly rested. Every luxury she had ever enjoyed, she now understood, required the profound suffering of countless people who would never experience anything even remotely approaching her level of comfort. Every convenience of noble life demanded the harrowing sacrifice of human beings whose lives were cruelly measured in production quotas rather than personal fulfillment. Every single moment of her privileged existence, she realized with dawning horror, was purchased with the blood, sweat, and desperation of populations she had never been allowed to see, never allowed to acknowledge. The revelation arrived not as a sudden, shattering shock, but as a creeping, agonizing awareness that accumulated detail by detail, horror by horror, until the sheer weight of understanding became utterly impossible to bear. She had not been overtly evil, she reflected, but she had been profoundly ignorant. She had not been consciously cruel, but she had been unconsciously complicit. She had not deliberately chosen to cause suffering, but she had definitively chosen to remain blind to the suffering that her very existence undeniably required. The pod eventually reached a maintenance station where they were required to stop for refueling and route planning, a bustling facility serving as a crucial hub for the technical personnel who tirelessly kept the hive's intricate systems operational. Here, Lady Cassara encountered workers whose expertise maintained the very infrastructure that underpinned noble existence, yet whose own harsh living conditions starkly revealed the true priorities of the system they so selflessly served. They resided in spaces that would be considered utterly uninhabitable by noble standards, consumed food that would be instantly rejected by aristocratic pets, and breathed air that would trigger immediate evacuation if ever detected in noble districts. Yet, these were the indispensable individuals whose sheer competence and unwavering dedication prevented the total collapse of the complex systems that sustained hive civilization itself. Their profound knowledge of complex technical systems far exceeded that of most nobles. Their problem-solving abilities surpassed the limits of aristocratic education, and their unwavering commitment to their responsibilities put noble privilege to profound shame. They worked, she observed, not from choice, but from dire necessity, not from satisfaction, but from sheer desperation, not from loyalty, but from the simple, brutal requirement of survival in a system that offered them absolutely no alternatives. Lady Kassara spoke with several of these workers during the refueling stop, her genuine questions revealing an unexpected, deep curiosity about their lives and experiences. Their candid responses provided her with perspectives that her privileged education had never once included, insights that her comfortable assumptions had never allowed her to even contemplate. They spoke of families tragically destroyed by industrial accidents, of children who would never receive an education because their labor was considered more valuable than their learning, of communities existing in conditions of perpetual emergency as systems designed for maximum efficiency operated constantly on the very edge of catastrophic failure. The conversation powerfully revealed the immense human cost of the efficiency she had once admired during her educational tour, the pervasive suffering that lay beneath the success she had been taught to celebrate, the desperate drive that fueled the productivity she had been trained to value. The workers spoke without a trace of bitterness, their tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory, their manner quietly accepting of harsh realities that would unequivocally horrify noble sensibilities. They had, she realized, adapted to conditions that would instantly shatter aristocratic morale, developed a profound resilience that put noble character to shame, and somehow found ways to maintain their humanity in circumstances meticulously designed to reduce human beings to mere interchangeable components in vast, uncaring production systems. As the pod resumed its journey toward the noble districts, Lady Kassara found herself struggling, almost painfully, to integrate what she had witnessed and learned with the ingrained assumptions that had defined her entire existence. The comfortable certainties of her upbringing simply could not easily accommodate the brutal realities she had now confronted. The moral simplicities of her education proved utterly inadequate to address the harrowing complexities of the situations she had encountered. She faced an agonizing choice, either to cling to her blissful ignorance or to accept knowledge that would fundamentally transform her understanding of everything she had ever believed about herself and her world. The final section of the journey led her through the transitional zones between the working districts and the noble spires, areas where the very character of the hive began to subtly shift from stark utilitarian functionality to meticulous aesthetic consideration. Here, the stark differences in maintenance standards, air quality, and general living conditions became glaringly apparent as the pod moved from spaces designed purely for production to spaces designed solely for consumption. From areas where human beings were treated as expendable resources to areas where human comfort was the single overriding consideration. The dramatic contrast powerfully revealed the artificiality of the boundaries that separated noble existence from worker reality, and the deliberate nature of the barriers meticulously erected to prevent aristocratic awareness of the true costs of privilege. The improved conditions of these transitional zones existed not because resources were suddenly abundant, but because priorities abruptly shifted from maximizing production to unequivocally ensuring noble comfort. The very same materials, the same labor, the same technical expertise that could dramatically improve conditions in the working districts were instead directed toward maintaining the perfect, pristine environments that shielded the nobility from any uncomfortable awareness of the suffering that sustained their existence. Lady Cassara observed these transitions with newfound, disquieting clarity, her recent exposure to raw reality providing her with the essential context necessary to truly understand what she was seeing. The comfort that enveloped her as the pod approached the noble districts no longer seemed natural or inevitable. Instead, it appeared artificial, meticulously constructed, and maintained at a tremendous hidden cost. The luxury that defined aristocratic existence no longer seemed a deserved privilege, but rather a deliberate, conscious choice to prioritize noble comfort above fundamental human welfare. The pod finally reached the noble districts as evening approached, its arduous journey complete despite the widespread disruptions that had rendered normal transportation impossible. The supervisor who had so capably guided her through the depths of the hive prepared to return to his duties in the industrial districts, his responsibility for her welfare concluding with her safe arrival in aristocratic territory. Yet before she disembarked, before she could fully return to the familiar comfort of noble existence, Lady Cassara found herself strangely reluctant to end their journey, reluctant to sever her newly forged connection to the reality she had just discovered. She thanked him for his invaluable assistance and expertise, her words carrying a genuine, heartfelt gratitude for someone whose sheer competence had made her safe passage possible. His response was polite but distantly professional, his manner reflecting the ingrained detachment of someone long accustomed to dealing with noble passengers without ever expecting lasting concern for his own circumstances or those of his fellow workers. The interaction concluded with the routine courtesy that typically characterized exchanges between aristocrats and those who served them. Yet, as Lady Cassara disembarked from the maintenance pod, as she prepared to re-enter the familiar luxury of her family's spire, she carried with her a profound new knowledge that would forever alter her understanding of her entire existence. The comfortable ignorance of her upbringing had been irrevocably shattered by direct exposure to the harsh realities upon which her privilege ultimately depended. The moral simplicities of her education had been irrevocably complicated by a crushing awareness of the immense human cost of the systems she had been trained to inherit and perpetuate. She stood at the grand entrance to her family's estate as evening shadows began to lengthen across the noble districts. Her day's extraordinary journey was complete, but her profound transformation was only just beginning. The golden light that filtered down from the orbital mirrors still illuminated the same magnificent architecture, the same meticulously maintained gardens, the same perfectly serene environment that had surrounded her since birth. Yet now she gazed upon these familiar sights with an entirely new understanding, an agonizing awareness of the suffering that had purchased their beauty, a damning knowledge of the exploitation that sustained their perfection. The servants who greeted her upon her return displayed their usual impeccable efficiency and deferential respect, their manner utterly unchanged by her absence or her transformative experiences. They assisted her with the time-honored rituals of arrival, helping her transition smoothly from the discomfort of emergency transportation back to the accustomed luxury of noble existence. Their movements were choreographed by years of devoted service, their responses automatic, their entire attention focused solely on ensuring her comfort and meticulously meeting her every need. Yet Lady Kasara now found herself seeing these servants through an entirely different lens, recognizing in their practiced efficiency the very same profound adaptation to difficult circumstances that she had observed in the industrial workers. The same unwavering resilience in the face of conditions that demanded constant sacrifice of personal needs to serve the relentless demands of others. The servants in her family's estate existed in conditions vastly superior to those she had witnessed in the working districts, but they remained fundamentally powerless, their lives entirely shaped by the needs and desires of those they served. She retired to her opulent chambers to prepare for the evening meal, the familiar routine of aristocratic self-care proceeding exactly as it always had, despite the revolutionary changes in her internal understanding. The servants attended to her needs with mechanical precision, dressing her in garments appropriate for dinner, carefully arranging her appearance to meet the exacting standards expected of noble presentation. The process felt superficially the same as it always had, yet her acute awareness of its true hidden cost had been fundamentally altered by her exposure to the realities that sustained it. As she prepared to join her family for dinner, Lady Kasara faced the daunting challenge of maintaining normal, aristocratic behavior while inwardly burdened by knowledge that threatened to dismantle every single assumption defining noble existence. She would have to participate in superficial conversations that treated worker populations as mere abstract resources, discuss policies that brazenly prioritize profit over fundamental human welfare, and feign enthusiasm for luxuries purchased with the suffering of people she could no longer, ever ignore. The dining hall awaited her with its customary magnificence, the long table meticulously set with the finest materials in the galaxy, the assembled family and esteemed guests prepared for another evening of aristocratic entertainment. The food, she now understood, represented the horrifying culmination of the exploitation she had just witnessed. The conversation would inevitably cover topics whose immense human cost she could no longer dismiss. The entire event, she realized with a sickening lurch, would celebrate a way of life that required the perpetual misery of billions for the temporary pleasure of mere dozens. She took her place at the high table with the automatic grace of someone perfectly performing a familiar role, her position reflecting her family's exalted status, her presence expected and welcomed by those who shared her bloodline and privilege. Yet she sat among them now as someone fundamentally, irrevocably changed. Someone who had seen beyond the carefully maintained boundaries of noble perception. Someone who could never again enjoy aristocratic luxury with the innocent ignorance that had once made such pleasure possible. The evening meal proceeded with its ritualistic precision, each course arriving with a ceremony that transformed mere consumption into a grand performance, each exquisite dish representing not merely food, but a powerful statement about wealth, refinement, and unassailable position. Lady Kasara participated in the familiar routines of noble dining, her outward behavior utterly indistinguishable from previous evenings, her manner giving no indication whatsoever of the revolutionary changes in her understanding. Yet every single bite now carried new, disturbing meaning. Every conversation revealed new, horrifying implications. Every moment of luxury demanded new, agonizing consideration of its true cost. She sat at the high table of her family's estate, surrounded by the finest products of galactic civilization, attended by servants whose unwavering dedication ensured her comfort, protected by intricate systems that guaranteed her safety. And she knew, with terrible, crystalline clarity, exactly what all of this ultimately required. The knowledge would never leave her. The awareness would never fade. The understanding would never be forgotten. Lady Kasara had crossed the profound distance that separated paradise from hell, and she could never return to the innocent ignorance that had once made her comfort possible. She must now choose what to do with this overwhelming knowledge, how to live with this crushing awareness, and whether to act on this newfound understanding. The conversation flowed. The world continued its familiar orbit around her, as conversations flowed with the effortless assurance of those accustomed to wielding power, never once doubting their inherent right to craft decisions that would ripple across billions of lives. They articulated policies and profits, strategies and opportunities, all meticulously designed plans to amplify their own wealth. Yet, Kasara now recognized, destined to simultaneously deepen the suffering upon which their edifice was built. Their voices resonated with absolute certainty. Their pronouncements bore the unquestioned weight of their privilege, and their fundamental assumptions rested on the unyielding strength of unchallenged tradition. Lady Kasara listened, her perceptions sharpened. Her privileged education had meticulously prepared her for a life of leadership, yet deliberately failed to equip her to recognize the dire implications now unfolding, nor to calculate the true devastating costs. With chilling clarity, she now saw the stark realities concealed beneath their comfortable abstractions, the profound human truths underlying their detached discussions, and the pervasive suffering that quietly sustained their casual assumptions about the natural order of existence. A profound and inescapable choice confronted her: to speak out or remain silent, to challenge or to accommodate, to act upon her searing new understanding, or to protect the ingrained ignorance of her world. This decision, she understood, would define not merely her personal future, but her very character. Not merely her comfort, but the essence of her soul. Not merely her inherited privilege, but the breadth of her humanity. The chasm between paradise and hell had been irrevocably measured, and she had crossed its threshold. The question now was whether she would strive to build a bridge or maintain the isolating chasm, whether she would extend her hand to those below or selfishly pull up the ladder that had allowed her to witness this truth. The evening meal unfolded around her, its familiar rhythms undisturbed by her internal transformation, its comfortable certainties untroubled by the unsettling clarity of her newfound knowledge. Yet Lady Kasara sat among her family and peers as one who had seen truth, now burdened by knowledge that would forever press upon her with the weight of choice. Never again could she partake in aristocratic luxury without a searing remembrance of its true cost, and of those who were forced to pay that agonizing price. The golden light of the orbital mirrors streamed through the great windows, illuminating faces that remained beautiful in their serene ignorance, voices that resonated with confident assumptions, and lives that continued in comfortable isolation. And at the center of this radiant, oblivious tableau sat a young woman who had profoundly understood. The distance between paradise and hell was not geographical, but moral. It was not measured in kilometers, but in choices. It was not crossed by transportation, but by conscience. She had seen the profound demands her existence imposed, understood the heavy responsibilities her privilege required, and recognized the true costs of her lifelong comfort. Now, she faced the daunting task of deciding what to do with this unbearable knowledge.